really thrilled to see so many of you here today. Jack Lundeberg had no enemies, only friends, and most of you are here today. Many times Jack told me that if anything ever happened to him, he only had one wish, and that was that all his friends would get together and have a big party. So that's what we're here for. So please, all of you who have one, let's raise a glass, not to mourn Jack's death, but to celebrate his wonderful life among us.
Hip, hip!
In our house. We have a very loosely organized format tonight. A lot of people have asked for the opportunity to stand up and talk about Jack. So that's what we're going to do. And please, while you're listening to them, if you would like to add something, then by all means do it. We're not in a hurry, and this party will go on as long as you all want. If you have commitments later on, please feel free to leave whenever you like. Please don't forget to sign the book for Jack's daughter, Lonnie. For those of you who didn't see the obituary notice in the paper, there'll be a memorial service for Jack this coming Saturday at 11 a.m. at the Emmanuel Congregational Church in Hartford at the corner of Woodland and Farmington Avenue. I would like to thank Hank Glover, the president of the Light Opera, and all our friends who worked so hard to make this evening possible. And I would also like to introduce members of Jack's family who are here. Bonnie was too emotionally upset to make the trip from Seattle. And if I miss anybody, I'm sorry.
We'll let you know.
We have some cousins here, Barbara and Harold Manston, and Dick and Errol Knoll, are sitting back there. Son Roy, and daughter Bonnie and husband Ken Beatrice. And let's see if I can pick out Jack's brother Roger. And you have no idea how difficult it has been for 31 years to have another Roger in the family.
Nice one at that.
Especially his last name begins with L.
But he's the one that sings though, right?
Yeah.
And sings well.
And Jack's brother Art with the camera. And Jack's sister Laurel here from Dayton, Ohio. Her husband Tom Shivitz. And Marjorie, whom most of you know. And my daughter Corey. And my son is on an aircraft carrier somewhere in the North Sea, so he couldn't be here today. And certainly, last but not least, if I haven't missed anybody else, Jack's daughter Lonnie and her husband David Seitz. Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry.
How about Mrs.
The
L?
most important person of all, Jack's mother, who is sitting here in the front row, and who will soon be celebrating her 90th birthday. I have a few things to say about my relationship with Jack, which goes back obviously many, many years. And most of the things that I have to tell you are kind of funny. A couple of them involve Sheldon Baker. I remember one time about 9 or 10 years ago when my house needed re-roofing, and Jack said, "We can do that." And I said, "What do you mean, we?" And he said, "You and me, we can do that. We get a little help." So we enlisted Sheldon, and in the middle of July, we re-roofed the house. Bear in mind, my house has a roof that's 80 feet long, and it was so hot up there that you couldn't kneel down without burning your knees. And after Sheldon was up there for a few minutes, he said, "I can't stand this." And we had a way of getting to the roof by way of the deck of the pool, where you could climb up on the shed and up onto the roof. So I said to Sheldon, "Go out to the refrigerator and get some beer and bring it back." And Sheldon did, and he came up on the deck of the pool, and Jack was up on the roof with me, and Jack had on one of these carpenter's belts. And so he leaned over to get the beer, and the hammer fell out of his belt and hit Sheldon right on the head.
It's the only time I ever spilled a drink in my life.
better ever since.
Now you know why Sheldon is the way he is. And I can still remember Jack looking down and looking at Sheldon, who was by then spread-eagled on the deck of the pool, saying, "Don't spill the beer!" And one night, I remember Jack left my house in a state which could only be described as unsafe to drive. And at the bottom of the mountain, he had a blowout on his car and drove all the way to Unionville on the rim. And a couple of days later, when he told me about that, I said, "Jack, didn't you notice anything?" He said, "Well, I thought the ride was a little bumpy." And of course, who can ever forget the first big luau that Jack had at Rhoda Babcock's backyard. You know, we all marveled about the fact that Jack never got any sleep, and this was a typical occasion for him. We had a 3-day party for this luau, and the first day was involved with digging this huge pit, and we all brought over boulders in our cars so we could line the pit with boulders, and we had a big party that night. This is pre-luau, you understand. And everybody got royally snockered. And at about midnight, I was singing some song in the backyard, and right in the middle of the last note, Sheldon let off the biggest bunch of firecrackers you ever heard in your life. I'll never forgive you for that, by the way. And neither will most of the neighbors in West Hartford, because they called the police. And one neighbor was particularly vociferous, so Jack, in order to placate her, went over and invited her to the party, which was then going in high gear at about midnight. And she came over, and after a couple of hours, she had had about 7 or 8 drinks, and she decided it was time to wobble back to her house, whereupon she fell into the pit. It was a shame because she broke her ankle, and somebody had to cart her off to the hospital. But
We gave her a drink to go. She never did sue, did she?
It kept on going all night. Jack tended the fire, which was then started, put the pig in, had the luau the next night. As far as we could figure out, he stayed up for about 48 hours in a row, but that was typically Jack. And I always remember Jack as a board member of the Simsbury Light Opera Company, because one of the funniest sights I can remember is the fact that when the chorus cries out for the light opera, they all stand up in a row on the stage at the high school and they sing. And all the board members walk up and down listening to all these voices. And if you knew Jack, you know, his singing voice was not his strong point. And I said to him, "Jack, who are you trying to kid walking up and down looking so serious?" I said, "By the sound, you couldn't tell the difference between a soprano and a baritone." He said, "That may be true, but by the looks I can tell the difference." Well, I think I've said about enough for a while. I'd like to call on another person to make a few remarks, and I meant what I said. I'm going to call on a few people that have evidenced to me that they would like to say a few words, and the rest of you, if you want to say something, by all means, keep it in mind, and there'll be plenty of opportunity. Sheldon?
Well, obviously, many funny things happened to Jack and I. We really go back quite a long ways. I first got to know Jack, I think, about 76, somewhere around there, building sets and being involved in the Light Opera Company, and of course, through my friendship with Roger. And we had some tremendous times. And as I say, there are many funny times that we had. I guess I started out trying to remember a lot of the funny things that happened and did, but I guess my remarks are a little bit more of a serious nature. And I just got to thinking about it this afternoon, and probably like a lot of you here, I've had a very difficult time the past week and a half. And you know, Jack's passing, I think, will take a long time for me to really accept and absorb. It's really kind of like the time 4 years ago when my mother died. I'd make plans to tell her about this or that, or small bits and pieces of daily life and all the things that we did, and finally realized that I couldn't really talk to her anymore. And it was very difficult to realize that she was gone. It's going to be difficult for me to realize that Jack is gone too. We had shared a lot of things in common. One was love of food, And when I went out to live at this little place next door to Jack, I began to get an education in cooking. And I guess we probably educated each other in the art of drinking as well. This is when I was in the restaurant business. And I couldn't even come up with the, he and I were both having some hard financial times at this point. And as my last monthly payment, I'll never forget that I was in the restaurant at that point, and we could order booze on the cuff from various distributors. I hope nobody here from the state of Connecticut tonight. But, I ordered a household supply, and as part of my last payment to Jack, I gave him 4 bottles of Remy Martin because I knew that I could pay for it in time over the next 3 or 4 months, and that seemed to sit pretty well. So it also made a lot of nice desserts. But Uncle Jack was very understanding about my not always paying on time, and we had many deep philosophical discussions in our skivvies well into an August night. Of course, one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me in my life is meeting Brenda. Jack and Rhoda were responsible for that. Of an August night when, in 1978, we sat there and told quite a few stories. I kind of liked what I saw. And evidently you did too, Brenda. You got
Don't say a word.
You never know when the truth is going to come out. But anyway, Jack and Rhoda were responsible for that.
And we knew in 15 minutes we went,
Did you know? I was a willing victim. And then Brenda was so sick after that for the next, 2-3 years, I guess. The first bright and cheerful face that shined through was Uncle Jack's, sitting in the hospital room. I, of course, went through all of this rigor of calling the doctors as to when I should be there and what I should do. And the doctors all said, well, she won't know a thing or see anybody or recognize anybody, so why don't you come down to the hospital at such and such an hour? And I'd get there, and of course Uncle Jack would be sitting there, and Uncle Jack would be talking to Brenda. At that point I realized that this was a man who really took friendship very seriously. He was my friend, one of the best friends I'll ever have. And how do you say goodbye or to your father or your mother or your brother or to Uncle Jack? I sure miss him. I miss him. Always.
Sheldon, I know that was difficult because I'm sure all of you know that Sheldon and Jack were closer than brothers, and were great, great friends for many, many years. I'm sure that there are some other people who want to say something. Marjorie?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to share a little bit with you. Just, it's going to be very hard. Bear with me. When Roger and I were talking about this astounding news of Jack, we couldn't believe it. And we started talking about him, what he meant to us, and how unbelievable this wonderful person who's so alive. Well, one of the things we talked about was he burned his candles at both ends, and he got a book of poetry out, and I had to write it down to make sure I wouldn't forget. But Edna St. Vincent Millay wrote a few lines that were so meaningful, because to me, they represent a part of Jack that were very meaningful. It goes, "My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But ah, my foes, and oh, my friends, it gives a lovely light." And that is Jack. He gave a lovely light. He was so close to me. I was so grateful now. I see, and I can talk about him. He meant an awful lot. We became friends. Not only was he my big brother, but he became a beloved friend too.
The gentleman with the camera over there is
Want me to take that?
Marjorie's brother,
Oh, son.
Jack's brother Art, and I know Art wants to say a few words.
Jack was a happy-go-lucky guy, and I'm sure that he would want everybody here to be happy and enjoy themselves tonight. He came from a family of 7 children. He was the oldest one. We had a mother who was sitting here, 89 years old. Well, 50 years ago, we married a housewife. And our father was a dreamer and inventor. I wouldn't say that our household was disorganized, but when I was about 14 years old, I ran away from home. 3 days later, I came back, and nobody knew that Jack was a very smart kid. When he went to school, he skipped so many grades that when it got time for him to graduate from high school, he was so young that he had to stay in school and take high school postgraduate courses until he was 16 years old. He had a remarkable memory. He could read a paperback book in 45 minutes, and 5 years later, tell you all about it. I remember a couple of years ago, we had a cookout at my house, and Jack was there. We had about 15 people, and we were playing Trivia Pursuit. We had taken everybody on one side, and Jack on the other side, and Jack would have won easily. He just seemed to know all the answers.
And he never watched television. Really. That's what's more amazing, because a lot of that was contemporary information. Somehow he absorbed it.
Except sports. He didn't care about sports.
So anyway, he went into the Air Force, and while he was training in Texas, a 50 caliber shell went off in his hand. This put him in the hospital for a couple of months. And the original crew that he was with went on without him, and after a while, they were shot down over Germany. Jack was the flight engineer and the lead gunner on the B-17 bomber. He had 25 missions over Europe, came back to the United States, and he was learning to fly in a super fortress so he could bomb Japan, but then the war ended. He went off to college, got his degree in engineering and a master's in mathematics, and then he went on to the aerospace industry. While he was an engineer at Grumman, he taught advanced mathematics to the other engineers. He ended up at Boeing Aircraft out in Seattle, and he had 80 engineers under his supervision. When the government stopped funding the project he was working on, that's when he came back to Connecticut. Now, there was a service for Jack in Seattle on Thursday. I was there. I was talking to some of the engineers, and they told me of their affection and admiration for him. And they also said the reason they wanted him back so badly was because the project they were working on now, Jack's old crew had done most of the basic research from before. So anyway, Jack came back to Connecticut, and he got 2 jobs. He went to work for his father, and he went to work for Slocum. Neither one of them paid very well. It was about this time that he became a real gourmet chef. He had a great taste for fine food, and he really couldn't afford it at that time. As Sheldon was telling you, there was a couple of lean years there. So he would volunteer to make a gourmet meal for anybody that would provide the food. And it worked so well that he started the new fragrant School of Cookery. And that way, all the students brought their food, and every week they had a fantastic gourmet feast. And it was about this time that he got started with the luau. He had the first annual one in my backyard. I can remember going over to his house one Sunday for brunch. Got there around 10:30, and we didn't eat until 3 o'clock. I said, Jack, how come you always make everybody wait so long before you serve the food? His answer, hunger is the best sauce. You know, as an older brother, he gave me lots of good advice, and the one I liked most of all was, if somebody does you wrong, whether they're justified or not, forget it. Forgive them. Because if you carry hard feelings in your heart, you're only going to hurt yourself. And that's the way he was. He didn't hate anyone. And you know, whenever I hear Frank Sinatra sing, I did it my way, I think of Jack. Jack did it his way. Thank you.
There'll be more opportunity for people to talk, but I'm going to here, the director of the St. John's Church Choir, and the St. John's Church Choir in a couple of minutes is going to sing. But before they do, I think I ought to tell you why there is a connection between Jack Lundeberg, who couldn't sing, and the St. John's Church Choir, who certainly can. Several years ago, Jack was living in an apartment on Farmington Avenue, 3 or 4 blocks from St. John's Church. I sang in the choir, and one day he called me up and he said, you have a choir rehearsal on Wednesday night, don't you? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I'm going to do a little experimenting with food Wednesday night. And he said, why don't you come over afterwards and join us? We're going to have a nice feast. I said, well, Jack, I carpooled with 2 guys from Manchester, David Kennedy and Eric Coates. Oh, that's all right. He said, bring them along. So I did, and we had a wonderful time, and about a month later he called me up and he said, you know, that was a lot of fun. He said, I'm going to do that again. He said, but bring a few more folks along. I said, how many more is a few? He said, oh, 8 or 10. So I said, okay, and bear in mind, this apartment was, to put it mildly, small, for those of you who were in there. And Sheldon and Brenda lived right next door.
The outlet valve.
The outlet, yes. They had everything but a connecting door. Anyway, so I brought the 8 or 10 over, and 3 or 4 months went by, and he called me up again. He said, you know, I'm going to do it again. He said, bring the whole choir. So, he said, but Jack, there's like 22 people. Oh, that's all right, bring them all. So thereafter, for years, and Ralph can bear me out here, for years, every 3 or 4 months, Jack would call up and say, it's time to have the choir over again. And, you know, people said, what can we do for this man? And so I said, well, bring him a bottle of wine. So by golly, his wine cellar was well stocked from then on. And we had, you know, beef Wellington, poached salmon, an incredible series.
Peking duck. The duck, remember? All the red cooked ducks.
I mean, it was just...
Escargot casserole.
Yeah, escargot casserole.
Scallops,
This went on
Parmesan.
for years. And, you know,
You sure did.
just before Jack and Bonnie went to Seattle, by that time we were having all these feasts at their house in West Hartford. And just before they went to Seattle, they had the biggest feast of all for the whole choir over there. And, of course, they made Jack an honorary member of the choir. And every time there was a choir picnic, Jack went, and we all had a great time. And that was the kind of man Jack was. He never asked for anything. He just wanted to make people happy. And he sure succeeded. And so when Ralph and the choir found out about the fact that we were going to have this celebration, and it is a celebration tonight for Jack, they said, we have to sing. And so the St. John's Church Choir, under the direction of Ralph Valentine, is going to sing. And in case you wonder about the fact that Barry Whetstone is in the choir, I should point out to you that Barry is not a ringer. He comes by this honestly because for the last 2 Christmas Eves, he has sung with the St. John's Church Choir at their Christmas Eve service. And for all of you Episcopalians in the audience, I want you to feel not nervous about this because there is absolutely no chance that Barry will convert as far as however, here is the St. John's Church Choir.
We're going to sing 2 pieces for you. The first is How Lovely Is Thy Dwelling Place from Brahms' Requiem. And Sheldon says he personally tuned the piano, so.
What'd you say?
I kind of like to think about that as Jack's choir. Now, I'm sure there are a number of other people here tonight whom I haven't called on who would like to say something. And can I ask those of you who would to please just raise your hand or just stand up? Yes, Roger.
Well, 2 words about my brother Jack. By coincidence, all of Jack's great-grandparents were courtiers and courtesans at the King of Sweden's court. That's true. The king gathered the finest people in Sweden, and Jack can certainly live up to that heritage. I don't know anyone I've ever met who enjoyed living more than my brother Jack. He certainly wasn't an ordinary mortal. But first of all, I want to tell you a story about Jack when he was 4 years old. My father told this to me. My father gave Jack violin lessons. And one day, Jack was practicing, and some kid yelled. Jack put the violin down, ran out the door, and a couple of minutes came back later and continued to play like nothing had happened. My father said he probably got even with someone, some kid, and that's the way Jack was. Everything Jack did was at least one cut above anything else everybody else did. Jack was in the Boy Scouts, and some summers in his teenage years he went to Camp Pioneer. Now, in order to swim in the swimming area, you had to swim across the lake, which was a half a mile. What Jack did was he swam the other way, which was 5 miles. That's the way he was in everything he did. He always tried his best. And many times he invited me up to his home on River Road in Unionville, and he was heavy into Chinese cooking. I never forget the first time I ate it. Very funny. It was the best Chinese food I've ever had in my life. I said, Jack, you can't get this in the Chinese restaurant. And he said, well, I just followed the book. And he did, but he did it right. I'll miss my brother. He had a tremendous influence on me. I can't tell you how lucky I am to have had a brother like Jack. Incidentally, when I got to Camp Pioneer, they wouldn't let me swim the long way.
Somebody else, please. Brenda?
There are many things about Jack, but
Jack was so complex that it's very difficult for me to say anything without saying a lot. But one thing I would like to say is that I'm not really superstitious, although I'm Irish. But the night we heard that Jack was gone, we couldn't do anything, so we went out for a walk. And we found that we couldn't walk, so we came home. And then we sat and we talked about Jack and all the things he meant to us. And a cricket started chirping. And it chirped for a long time when we talked about Jack. And then he stopped. And then the next night, we were talking with Lonnie and David, and we were talking with Bonnie, and we were talking with Roger and Marjorie. And every time we picked up the phone to talk to someone, the cricket would start chirping. And finally we said, we think that's Jack. We're not sure. But now I'm really sure. Because tonight, when the choir was singing, Sheldon was standing up here. I think he was right about here, and he was saying,
Is there anyone else who would like to say something? Rhoda?
Well, I hadn't known Jack very long. In fact, I hardly knew him when I mentioned one time at one of our Sloko rehearsals that my kitchen cupboards were falling down. And someone said, maybe you might have an idea of what I should do about it. And he said, yeah. He said, I'll fix it. And so next day he came over and we took everything out of the cupboards and had it all over the house. And he fixed those kitchen cupboards. And I mentioned to someone here what a phenomenal job he did. And he said, yeah, your house will fall down someday, but those cupboards will and,
Hear, hear.
and I look at those kitchen cupboards when I'm in the kitchen, which isn't too often. And I think of Jack, and then he went and built some other shelves for me because I needed them. But I hardly knew the man, and he came and did that, and he was just wonderful. And of course, for those of you who attended the luau, I mean, that was just a phenomenal thing. And I couldn't believe it. People said to me, how come you're letting all those people dig a hole in your bedroom? I said, yeah, well, you know, no problem.
Kind of snowball.
It did snowball, and there were people, Jack invited people, and my daughter invited people, and other people invited people, and there were a lot of people there I didn't even know. I mean, and my daughter's friends invited some. It's too bad not everybody here was there, but it was quite special. And Sue Gordon just reminded me of something that was so typical, and the gentlemanly part of Jack. And we had all attended a Sloko picnic, and that was the bus trip. Those of you remember the bus trip. Well, there were several of us that helped Jack get to his apartment. Now this is third floor, wasn't it, Brenda? A lot of steps.
yeah.
And after we got him up there, he wanted to escort us back to our car. And, I mean, a big heart that man had, and still has. And we will all rejoice in his memory.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of Brenda Rhoda's, that luau. We have a couple of pictures on the bulletin board of that luau. Also, a framed picture over there, I think behind Jean Fenn somewhere. There is a picture that Brenda had in her house of that same luau. It's a famous, very famous luau. Let me just explain some of the pictures I brought on the bulletin board. The big one in the middle is Jack putting up more cabinets in his new kitchen. And
More
that's
stuff.
what that is, right there in the middle. More what?
More
More
stuff.
cabinets, kitchen cabinets in his new kitchen, right there. The one on the upper left is Jack in his famous hat on the set of the Mikado. Next to that is 1983 picnic at the Glover's Lake, this big Slocum picnic every year. Okay, and that long line in the middle is about the, well, it shows Jack at his birthday party in 1983, November 15th it was. He had admired a plow that summer when he was up in Maine with his friend Olive Metcalf and Bonnie. And little did he know what was in store for him on his birthday. They had it all shipped down. And they brought it in, and you can see the sequence of events of that plow. Now, he couldn't believe it. That plow went with him to Seattle. Not only that, but last Thursday, in the backyard where they had a memorial service for Jack, that plow was there with the flowers around it as part of the service because that became his favorite possession.
Is there someone else who would like to say something?
One thing that I didn't say, and this is a very brief word about Christmas. Jack was one of the people that kept Christmas probably as well or better than anybody since Charles Dickens. And every year at Christmas time, Jack would wrap up literally 12, 14, 50 gifts, and he'd spend the whole day unwrapping things. And he had little clues as to what it might or might not be. And sometimes they bore no relation, and there was always some little surprise. There was inevitably some kitchen gadget or something that was terribly useful or something terribly important to you, a book about some topic. The thoughtfulness of the man and the thoroughness of Jack as far as every detail and all the memories that he had of all the conversations that he had with him was really incredible. And Christmas, it all came out and it all blossomed out. And it's another thing that I'll never forget as long as I live. He was a man who really kept Christmas, I guess, the way the spirit is supposed to be. That's going to be one of the special good memories that I have of Jack. Every Christmas.
I see Jack's brother Russell, who wasn't here earlier, has arrived and has indicated he'd like to say something. Yes? Russell?
Well, the first thing I wanted to remind some of you about, maybe you know, but Jack came from a rather large family. In fact, it spanned a couple of generations. When I was small, Jack was a legend. I can remember that that legend, which was greater than life. And Jack was also an enigma, as many of you may know. And as I'm listening to all of you, and as I have known of Jack really through some of you people, I realize that you actually participated and experienced this legend, which I only knew as a small child, which is really remarkable. So in a way, I'm envious of all of you, and I think you're quite lucky to have actually lived the legend that I only knew of as a small child. And I'm glad that this gathering did occur, although I had my misgivings about it, because I realized that there is a great deal of love among all of you. There was a lot for Jack, still is, and I know that he loved all of you. I can remember when I was quite young, some of the stories that I would hear, one of which really fits into Jack's character, and that was when he volunteered for the draft during the Second World War. He wasn't satisfied with the government issued. He had all his uniforms tailor-made.
That's an amazing story.
That's a shot. Jack was
That's out of character.
trim. Well, he remained relatively trim throughout his years, but when he was 18, I think he had a 28-inch waist. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's, which is about what I had when I was that age. But I can remember the stories about his experience during the war, which he didn't talk about, but I heard about it secondhand. And the things that he did, his luau's. In fact, I went to one of them. Took an awful long time for the pig to get cooked, but it tasted pretty good. And I don't have to tell you, you've all experienced many of the great things that Jack did. I could say excessive things, because he did everything to an excess, to an extreme, or to perfection, depending on your point of view. I like to think of it as a point of perfection. Complex? Yes, very complex. Brilliant? I gave a lecture on patent law. I'm not an attorney, I'm an engineer, as Jack, so we have something like all of us. All the brothers are in that field in one way or another. And I gave a lecture at Hartford State Technical College, where I'm an adjunct professor. And one of the fellows from the audience came up after and said, I worked with Jack at Grosside. I said, oh, he's also Canadian. He said, yeah, he's a remarkable person. Do you know how brilliant he is? And I said, oh, really? He knows everything. Just before Jack left, I went over to Grosside because I thought it'd be nice to have lunch with him before he left. And it turns out he had already left, although he hadn't made his trip to California. And the people there remarked about how well liked he was. So I can see that he has reached many people in many respects. And in a way, I'm envious that I haven't been there, but of course you have. All of you know that. So I'm very glad for you. And Jack's legend lives on.
There's no question about that, Russell. Everybody who knew Jack will never forget him. Is there anyone else who would like to say something? Laurel.
Wonderful testimony to hear all these wonderful things. I just, since I'm the next oldest, following Jack, and I'm only a year younger, I didn't have any trouble in school because the teacher saw me coming, and since I looked just like Jack, only in a feminine way, they said, aha, here comes another smart one. Believe it or not, it really worked. I got through school, and I was just as young as Jack. In fact, we were both in West Hartford High the same year, only I was graduating and he was doing postgraduate work. And I was just barely 16. So you see, it was wonderful to have an older brother.
Roger.
Tom. Laurel's husband, Tom, from Dayton, Ohio.
Well, this is a time of sharing, and I had to wait till my wife said a few words. It wouldn't be fair, for me to step up and say something. I'd like to share two things. First of all, to share with you fellowship and the love that, that I've enjoyed by virtue of marrying into this family. You know, I have reliable sources that have told me that when Mother Lundeberg heard that her daughter was dating me, she said, "Ah, a German?" So it is a bit of a testimony, Mother, that unfortunately I'm also the German who took one of the members of the Lundeberg family out of Connecticut. "You're the oldest," and I am too. And he said, "Yes, but it's difficult to set a good example." And Jack, I want to tell you, I know you're listening now, you certainly did set a good example.
You know, I told Tom that he and Lorella have been at my house so often this summer that we were going to change the name of the room from the family room to the Shivitz room. And that he would get my bill in a couple of weeks and he could use his American Express card if he wanted to pay for it. But he still keeps coming back. It's amazing. Is there anybody else? I think that if no one else has anything to add, and certainly you're more than welcome to stand up and say whatever you... Oh, I forgot about Bruce. Bruce, you wanted to say.
Well, it's kind of hard to cover all the things that went to someone working backstage where I first started. I first met him when we did Ruthergore many years ago. I was quite new at it, came with my hammer and screwdrivers prepared to do something, and nobody seemed to know what to have me do, so they said, "That's Jack over there. He does all the crazy things." So that's what I went and did. And he made a lot of things that out of wire, and things that you said, "Come on, Jack, this isn't going to work." He says, "Oh yeah, it'll work. Just have a little patience. You get this right, you adjust this. Everything always seems to go." And I said, "Well, how can you picture how this is going to work?" He says, "In everything I've ever did, I've always dreamed what the final thing was, and then started at the other end. And it always works out exactly the way I picture it in my mind." He says, "And you never lose sight of the way things are." And it wasn't so much just the techniques and things that I watched him do, and he was doing everything. It was his attitude. Nothing was ever a failure. You could always make good out of anything, be it a piece of scrap wood on the floor or anything. You just had a way of finding something useful out of everything. And I wrote a little thing. It's kind of hard to put it into words. I don't know if I'll last all the way through it, but I'll take a shot at it. At Ruthergore, I first met Jack, rigging pulleys lying on his back. To set 3 flats upon the floor, scene 1 into scene 2, revolving doors. Onto Pirates' Cathedral windows, making for us a motorized moon, taking 15 minutes from left to right, a beautiful effect for one's sight. Softly lit in candles in blue, the passing night of Act 2. Moving on to Mikado, grand, he said, is the way to go. Tittipoo's Bridge, with ferns and rice, and a real waterfall, oh so nice. Through Utopia, Pinafore, and Trial, windmills, clocks, flying birds too. And this, my friends, is just a few of the miracle things that Jack could do. Whatever dream you could write or feel, Jack Lundeberg would make it real. Putting 30 hours into each day, we're all blessed Jack came our way. Thank you.
extend this all evening. I know some people have a lot of places to go. There's a lot of food and there's a lot of drink. But before we adjourn to the food and drink, is there anyone else who has anything they'd like to add to this? If not, I think Barry would like to conduct the local chorus. Barry, tell us what you want to do.
I think the Pirates' Penzance is one of Jack's favorite shows. And I'd like to do two numbers from the Pirates. One is When the Foeman Bears the Steel. And for that, I need some people. John, play the piano. Althea, Scotty Porterfield. And I know the members here. Clyde, where are you sitting? And the chorus, the entire chorus is going to sing. You all know the music. The entire chorus is going to sing. Everybody's going to sing. Stay where you are and sing. Stay where you are. John, here. There you go. More of us up here than
Intentions are well meant. Such expressions don't appear. Calculated meant to cheer. Who are going to meet their fate in a highly nervous state. Still to us it's evident these intentions are well meant.
Go, ye heroes, go to glory, and before our links we sever, we will say farewell forever. Go to glory and the great, go to glory and the great. All you warriors and ruthless swamps and mercies falling through the choke and tender all and journey all and big the mercy sang.
We observe to great stress on the wrist that must press, and a preference alack to our counts of coming back. Still, perhaps it would be wise not to come or criticize, for it's very evident these intentions are well meant.
Yes, it's very evident these intentions are well meant. Evident, yes, well meant. Evident, ah, yes, well meant. When the foeman bears his steel, ta-da, 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 the uncomfortable people, ta-da,
next number we're going to do is the Sloco National Anthem. John Garrison will sing, and everybody will sing. And one.
Although our dark careers sometimes make the crime of stealing, we rather think that we're not all together void of feeling. Although we live by strife, we're always sorry to begin it. For what we ask is life without a touch of poetry in it.
I sure hope I got you. All I did was push this button here.
Hey, Brenda. Would you like to say something on the wall? Arthur. Anything additional?
This is an auspicious occasion. Very auspicious occasion.
Very. I'm going to kill it.
I call him Popcorn Jack. Always had popcorn. When I worked on scenery with him, he always had him. He loved popcorn.
Yeah, that's right. Like the popcorn.
And I did his hat. I would repair his hat. He'd come to me and say, Dottie, the hat is getting thin on top, so will you put something on it? And I put that little bow on top, and I put pieces of material from every show are on his face.
Oh, is that?
Hat. Because I did the costume.
No kidding.
Yeah.
You know, when I just saw that hat Wednesday and Thursday when I was out there.
It's quite a hat.
It's quite a hat.
Yeah.
And I just really loved the picture of him in the background on the, not the menu, but the, remember the last play they had? And Jack was in the background on one of the pages?
Oh, yes.
He with his hat on there?
Iolanthe. It was Iolanthe, and he was on there with his hat, and that was great. Yes, we had a great rapport. Admired each other's work very much, which I appreciated very much. You're very nice. You look like him, too.
Thank you.
That's great.
Maybe a little bit handsomer?
A little, no,
Not
the
quite
hair
as
is
clever.
the same.
I used to follow Jack's hairline, and he was always, you know, I knew how my hairline would look in 3.5 years.
Oh. But don't let it grow long. I didn't like it when it was long. Did you like it when it was long? I didn't like that. No. That looked, that's great. You've done a great job.
Thank you.